Hey, Joey, thank you. Thank you for
Oh,
your time.
it's my pleasure, Diego. Thanks so much for making time for the conversation today.
It's amazing to have you on, like, well, I was about to say in person, but at least in
As
Zoom.
close to in person as we can get without actually being in person. I appreciate that.
No, thank you. And well, the purpose of this conversation, as I mentioned to you, is that uh, this Friday, this today is Wednesday, we're gonna be recording this thing I've been putting up for the last couple of months called Books and Beers.
Books and beers, I love it. I was sold already when you told me, and then I had the chance to see some of the episodes, and I thought, oh, this is fantastic. 100%.
Yeah.
I love it.
Thank you. I mean, we're fine tuning. We know that we are long and we are extended, but that's part of what we're doing because
We're having fun, right?
we have exactly. That's
I
the
mean,
point.
as long as we're having fun, it doesn't matter how long it lasts.
Exactly. And my friend, Tero, he's a beer passionate, and he has like this app that is being used around Mexico and Latin America to rate the beers.
Yep.
So we've been talking like he likes to read, but I'm more into books than him. So it's okay.
Right. There you go.
Very interesting person, a Finnish guy, and so it's okay. Let's mix that up and let's see what happens. So yours actually is going to be the fourth book of the series. Let's say.
I love it. I'm thrilled to be on the show or be in the series.
Thank you. And well, unfortunately, we do this in Spanish. Maybe we will move to English in the future. I don't know. But it's because actually all I'm doing for a couple of years now, I started in English, now I'm moving to Spanish because I think it's the guys down here that we need the most to feel attracted, and sometimes even it shouldn't be a roadblock. It is sometimes the language.
Sure. No, absolutely. Well,
And
then
more
my
if you're having
Spanish
fun.
is not nearly as good as it should be. So I appreciate you conducting the interview in English so that I can follow along better.
Thank you. And when we decided to make your book, I am actually the guy that decides the books. Tero is just like, okay.
Teno decides the beer, you decide the books. Everybody
Exactly.
evens out.
Yeah.
There you go.
He's now proposing, so it's great. That means he's
Nice.
into it. So it was because I heard your interview with James Altucher,
Sure.
and it really hit me the part on how your concept of the faces, it really hit me hard on how to apply that on the personal side. And that was all my reflections were around that. Like I keep thinking of my parents and how they help us at home, and the housewarming we haven't done for a while, and
Sure.
and the friends and things like that. So I've been around sales for quite a while now. I'm very how do you say that I have a lot of interests.
Sure.
I'm moving along and have been selling things one another, and so I thought that will be a. Oh, I think I missed you. Okay, no.
No, I'm here.
Yeah, and so I thought, yeah, I will go and read Joey's book for the sake of all the concept of sales, and I've been in consulting.
Sure.
And now I've been in companies lately, working as an employee, and all the time you're selling. I think all the time you're selling is probably one of the most underrated skills, at least in Mexico and in Latin America.
I would argue it's underrated around the world. I agree. Dan Pink wrote a great book where he talks about the fact that everyone's in sales.
Yeah.
And I think that's true. And I believe the same holds true for customer experience and customer service. Everybody operates in customer experience, and whether it's the experience you're creating for your customers or from your coworkers or for your boss or your shareholders or your spouse or your children or your friends or your family, we're all responsible for how we make other people feel and the experiences we give them. And the more we pay attention to that, the richer and more fulfilled our life can be.
That was exactly what hit me, because I see this working in all those different stages or those different stakeholders, and
Sure.
So it was great, and so I bought the book. I bought it actually for my brother, who is at a consultancy firm. So I give it to him. I give it to another friend and say, well, I need to read this book. I'm just giving it out, and I can because of the podcast, I knew it will be word for them. So
sure. Well, I'm glad you felt that way, and I certainly appreciate my good buddy James Altucher for having me on his show. He's a character. I was teasing him after we were done recording. For those of you that are watching that have listened to the show, that we spent a lot of time talking about police and speeding tickets.
Yeah.
But I didn't want anyone to think I'm a criminal. But I appreciated his questions. He's a great guy.
It's a very good example of how that works in all levels. You know?
Sure.
The experience that you give everyone. And so, yeah, when I was talking earlier about sales, I think I was talking about the experience of the sale, you know, and this is what you describe so greatly in your book. And, you know, I have a team now, and we are like a small, inside the company, we are, like I always say, we are the consultancy firm inside the company, and we need to sell and we need to make a customer experience to our stakeholders. And I'm all the time, I'm mentioning a lot of different concepts around customer experience to my guys. So this book came along very great. So when I actually started the book is when I signed up for the special treats that you have for your readers. And that's when it hit me, like, well, maybe we can do some cameo or something of Joey on the show and ask a couple of questions to move it away from the sales paradigm. Let's say that a lot of people might think that the title of your book is about, you know, title. So since we're gonna be drinking and talking a lot of these times, I think it's a good idea to save Joey. And now I know that you don't drink. Well, I knew since the the James Altucher show that you just drink root beer. So I'm probably gonna bring some root beers.
So nice of you. That's very kind. A little honorary root beer for your non-alcohol drinking.
Exactly, something like that.
Nice.
So I did came up with a couple of questions. So I don't know if you want
jump in. Yeah, jump in wherever you like. That's great.
Okay. And I think the first one we already more or less covered, but it was who should read this. Right? I was asking myself that.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I wrote the book. The book is called Never Lose a Customer Again. And obviously it's written from the mindset of what do we do after the sale to keep the customers that we've worked so hard to acquire or to obtain. And one way you can read the book is as a business owner, whether that's somebody who's a business owner or a manager or somebody who works with growing a business, retaining customers, because I think the principles that I talk about in the book create a foundation and a framework for how to think differently about the customer journey. But as we talked about on the James Altucher show, that same methodology applies to our personal relationships.
Yeah.
So when we think about our personal relationships, a lot of times in the beginning, it's very exciting. It's very sexy, right? And this is like in dating, right? Or even just when we meet a friend and there's a chemistry there and everything sparks and we spend a lot of time together. But as time goes on, we get busy with other things. We have a tendency to take some of those relationships for granted. Maybe we don't call home as much as we used to. We don't hang out with our friends, our single friends, as much as we did once we get married or once we have children. And I think this is something that most people struggle with. I'm part of a private Facebook group, and one of my colleagues just posted today, actually, that he lamented the fact that as he's become a husband and a father, and he has his business, and he has his employees, the group that has suffered is his friends.
Yeah.
Because the time he has for them has moved further down the priority list. Yeah. And was kind of lamenting, what do I do? How do I do this? And to your point, Diego, you just said, well, that's life. And fair enough, that is. It's often a step in the life cycle. You know, we go from our single days maybe to our days in a relationship to maybe married days to maybe having children. And as more and more things take up our time, we have less time for our friendships, or maybe even less time for our extended family or our parents or our siblings. And so I think there's a framework in here as well for thinking about creating a remarkable experience for those people, because there's a belief that it's about the amount of time you spend. And while that's, or money. And while those things certainly impact, like you're always going to be investing some level of time and some level of money. Even if you go do something for free, you've sacrificed the opportunity to do something that would earn you money during that time. So some money has been spent during that time. it's a lot more about how people feel and what are the experiences you're creating and what are you doing to be memorable or be remarkable in your interactions. And even just shaking it up and doing something different can make all the difference. My wife and I like to go on date nights. And one of the dates we went on last week, we went to a new restaurant we'd never been to, and we walked to get to the restaurant as opposed to driving. So it was still a dinner.
Yeah.
And the cuisine was very good, but it was nothing that we hadn't had before. But the fact that we walked for a while and it was a different restaurant made it a different experience. So it made it more remarkable. And so I think there's an opportunity in both our business lives and our personal lives to think about these little interactions we have and think, how can I make them just a little different or a little more meaningful?
Yeah, that's great. That's great. I agree. And I just heard one of your podcast episodes, actually, when you mentioned that, like, you know, the guys in the train that are missing their schedule because the train is late, and they're doing that part of they're giving them this form. But
right,
you mentioned, like, if they do something funny around that, it will be remarkable. I mean, it's still remarkable, but it will be more remarkable. And you give the advice to everyone to take a minute to think of where they're gonna travel or what they're gonna do that it is remarkable, because. And I heard this in another podcast, that's the way you feel the time was worth it.
Right.
And then that's amazing.
Exactly. Yeah, it creates a different connection. And so many businesses and many aspects of our life are required. We're required to maybe take our kids to school. We're required to have dinner with friends sometimes. We're required to go to work. We're required to have a voicemail, to send an email to our customers. All these various things that are required in our life. But what can we do to make the required remarkable?
That's amazing.
What can we do to make those things stand out, to make them different? So for example, sometimes when I take my son to school, we did this last week. We took him to school and I decided that the entire drive to school, we were going to talk like pirates. Now it's crazy, right? Yeah. But he loved it. We got to school and he says, "Arr, see you later, matey," you know. and he goes into school having had something other than what might be the normal experience of driving to school. Oh, what are we going to do today? You know, listening to the radio or listening to music. We just did something fun and he really enjoyed it. And it didn't require any incredible ingenuity or creativity or intelligence on my part. It's just we'd been reading a pirate story the night before and we got in the car and he started talking like a pirate. And so I kept it going.
But I guess it's part of you now. I mean, maybe at the beginning it was like, I mean, you need to start to think like that. Like, right. It's to be a good observer, as you said in the book, like to find the opportunities, because we are in zombie mode, or, you know.
Yes, absolutely. And like we worry, right? We worry that if we do something different, it's not going to work, or they're going to laugh, or they're not going to like it. And what I've found is the more I have fun, the more people remember that, the more they like it. So I gave a speech recently, and as I walked out on it, I spend most of my time as a speaker. I've written this book, and I'm going to write more books, but the bulk of my days are spent as a speaker. And as I was going on stage, the gentleman introduced me, said that from my he knew he had done some research on my bio that I used to sing with a group. And so he said, "So why don't you sing us a little song to start?"
Nice.
Now, I had a couple choices.
Yeah.
In that moment, I could have said, "Oh no, this is a business setting. I'm not going to sing anything." But instead, I started singing a Frank Sinatra song, "Fly Me to the Moon," and just had fun with it. And the audience laughed and they loved it. And there was a DJ who started playing some music, and it was exciting. Amazing. And then I finished and I gave my speech. Now, here's the interesting thing. I think more people will remember that I sang on stage than what I actually said in the speech, but that's okay. Because at the end of the day, all we want is people to remember us. We want them to remember the time they've spent with us as being meaningful, as being unique, as being special, as being remarkable.
That's great. Then that's great. I mean, we have just the first question, so that's good. I think I mean, I'm seeing the questions right now, and I think we're covering some of them, but You know, well, the people that is watching in the future, they don't know yet, but you have 8 phases for this customer or this user experience. This
right,
is
the journey,
whatever.
The relationship journey, whether it's, you know, your customer, whether it's your significant other, whether it's a friend, we have these chance to go through similar phases as human beings.
And in those 8 phases, because we're gonna explain those more in detail in the episode. My question was: is there one phase that you think is more critical? Like this one, you cannot miss this one, because if you miss this one, like the Pareto in those 8 phases. Would you say there's another?
Well, I would say, you know, it's my personal belief that they're all important, but I will tell you there are 2 that most people either skip or forget or don't pay attention to. Okay. So it's not that they're necessarily more important to the other ones, but they're the ones people don't pay attention to. So if I may, can I give a quick overview of the 8 phases? Because I think it'll be useful. Or do you want me to talk about the 2?
No,
So the 8 phases are as follows. Phase number 1, assess. And I'll explain these in the context of a customer because I think it'll be easier to understand, but we can apply it personally afterwards. In the assess phase, a prospect is considering whether or not they want to do business with you. They're assessing who you are. This is what we think of as marketing and sales in the typical business. Then we come to phase 2, admit. This is where the prospect acknowledges that they have a problem or a want or a need, and they believe you can help them with it. Then we go to phase 3, affirm. This is where they begin to doubt the decision that they just made. Buyer's remorse sets in, and they're questioning the decision they just made to work with you. Then we come to phase 4, activate. This is where you kick off the relationship, and you need to energize the relationship, whether that's with a kickoff meeting or the first time they see your product or service and start to use it. What are we doing right at the beginning of the relationship when things officially begin? Then we come to phase 5, the acclimate phase. This is where they're getting used to your way of doing business, right? They're getting familiar. You've done this hundreds of times. For a new customer or a new relationship, this is the first time they've ever had this experience to you. Yeah. Then we come to phase 6, accomplish. This is where they accomplish the goal that they had when they originally decided to do business with you. Then we come to phase 7, adopt. This is where they become loyal to you. They adopt the relationship and they don't want to shop anywhere else or deal with anyone else. They're loyal and committed. And then finally, and only then, do we come to phase 8, advocate, where they become a raving fan, singing your praises and inviting their friends and family to learn more about you. Now, here's the interesting thing. Of those 8 phases, the 2 that get missed the most are the affirm phase and the acclimate phase. So that affirm phase where we have to counter their feelings of buyer's remorse, their regret of how this has happened, and the acclimate phase where once we get into it, how do we keep it exciting? How do we keep it interesting? How do we keep them engaged? So let's take it out of a business context to a personal context, okay? The affirm stage would be what happens between the time. Can we talk about a dating scenario? I think that keeps it more exciting. We're having beers and books. Let's talk about where alcohol is normally involved.
All right. Sounds great.
Okay. So the affirm stage would be you meet someone, you think you'd be interested in them, you ask them if they want to go out on a date next Friday night. Between now and next Friday night, what happens? Well, in the typical relationship, nothing. We're just all waiting for Friday. The anticipation's building. But we're also maybe wondering, oh, should I really have done that? I don't know. He seemed like a nice guy. Was I drunk? Was I just being generous? What's happening? What are we doing in that period to reaffirm the decision? Now, the acclimate stage comes after the first date. So we have that first date and it goes fabulously. Then we have a second date. Well, we might not put as much time and effort into the second date because we're feeling a little more comfortable. And then the third date and a fourth date. By the 10th date, while we may still be enjoying the relationship, we're probably starting to take some things for granted.
Yes.
Right? And so what can we do as the relationship continues to keep investing in making it interesting, to keep finding ways to make it remarkable or engaging or exciting? That's what makes a relationship last long term.
Yes, and that will be like more into the acclimate.
Exactly. And so that's in that acclimate phase.
At least in Spanish, the acclimate, it will be like how to make the opposite of acclimating. Like, because when you
Yes.
when you acclimate, it's like you're used to, and what you want is in that period of getting used to, keep on the surprises, right? Like very simple, a very basic principle in relationships. Like it's in the details, and keep the fire going, and
paying attention to the little things. Remembering, I remember, so my wife doesn't eat tomatoes. She's not allergic, but they don't work well for her. And I remember we had been dating for almost a year, and we went to a restaurant and we had some French fries. And I put some ketchup on my plate, and then I said, "Here, do you want the ketchup?"
Yeah.
And she just looked at me like, "We've been together a year. I've never had ketchup. In the entire time we've been, why do you think tonight?" And I was like, "I'm sorry. I wasn't present. I wasn't thinking. I was on autopilot. I was being polite, but in being polite, I failed to acknowledge something that I already knew about that person."
Yeah. No.
Right? We started the conversation talking about beers. I don't drink alcohol anymore. I used to, but I don't anymore. It never bothers me if somebody offers me a drink who doesn't know. If somebody who's known me for years is popping beers and says, "Here, I got you one," I'm going to say, "Thank you, but I'm not going to drink it." So you just got yourself an extra one, right? Yeah. And I never take offense at it, but the longer the relationship goes, the more important it is for us to remember the little details about the people we're in relationship with.
Is the personalization part that you mentioned?
Exactly.
Like you cannot be generic in your long-term relationships, right? I mean, I just to give you an example, that it brings so vividly this time to my mind the book, because we were in a trip to Europe with my parents, the last one before I got married, and we was with my mom and my dad in Spain, and we were driving around the country, and I remember we were, we're family, so we start to discuss a lot. We were discussing in the car, and we were like I don't know, very tense because a lot of hours in the car. And my mom said something it has more or less changed my view of life, and it very connected to this in that moment. She said, like, "Look, we need to make a pause. This is not the way we want to spend our time. Imagine that we are with good friends. You won't, and it's the opposite, because you have a lot of examples in your book about you won't do this to your relatives, right?
Sure.
But there are scenarios where you treat your relatives
worse than you treat your friends.
Exactly.
There are scenarios where we treat our spouse worse than we treat a stranger.
Exactly.
We treat our children worse than we treat a customer. And it's like
there's goosebumps right now, man.
Because we take them for granted. Because we get caught up in it, and instead stepping back and saying, "Wait a second, what actually are the most important relationships in my life?"
Exactly.
Here's the fascinating thing. So I have a good friend, Jim Shields, fantastic writer. He wrote a book called The Family Board Meeting, and he has this policy about 18 summers. And his theory is, if you're a parent, you have 18 summers with your children before they move away.
Wow.
And when you start thinking of only 18 summers, my oldest son is 5. They're almost a third gone.
Wow.
And he's only 5. So it really focuses you back on what's important. And what's important is to make the most of the time you have.
That's an amazing reflection. And I mean, it put a lot of things in perspective. Like, I remember listening to Gary Vaynerchuk saying, like, it's depending on how you see it, because he said, like, well, you have maybe 4 years to work. Take one project, spend 10 years in one of them. You have 4 great projects, and it's going to work out after 10 years. But that's the opposite of what you said, because in this case, my oldest is going to be 3, but just as you mentioned it's like, wow, it's only 15 left, and it's a fifth is gone.
Realize, wait, we're recording this in September. The summer just ended, and it's like, oh, another one's gone.
Oh my God. Yeah, man.
What do we do? And I think I'm not a scarcity person. I'm an abundant person.
Yeah.
But I think in relationships, all too often, there's a difference between being abundant and scarce, and honoring the relationship and taking the relationship for granted. And so what I try to do is be abundant, but honor the relationship, honor the time. Spend the time with the person and really connect and make a moment, because you don't know when the next moment's going to be.
Yeah.
It might be years. And I imagine, Diego, you've got friends who, my best friend from high school, we talk to each other maybe twice a year. And every time we talk, it's as if no time has passed.
Yeah.
Right? We're really good friends, and it's just together and we're, it's wonderful. And I make the most of those moments. When we do have that time together, I try to be very focused. I turn off my phone. I get rid of all distractions. I just spend time focused, because I know that I don't have a lot of those moments, and I want to make the most of the ones I do have.
And that focusing is the analogy of time and money, let's say, or like, because I want to tap on that idea. We've been talking very philosophically here, but I think it's all about, in this journey, it's all about being centered, being focused, and it's not about the money, not even the time. It's just being personal, taking things personally, right?
Sure. Well, yeah, and here's the thing. I had the pleasure of doing some work with Tony Robbins for many years, and Tony Robbins was the first person I heard refer to this phrase, and I've heard other people since. But he said, when you're spending time with someone, with a loved one, when you're first falling in love, a minute can seem like an hour. When you're spending time with a loved one who's dying, an hour can seem like a minute.
Wow. Yeah.
And so you're right. It's what is our focus during that time? What are we paying attention to? How present are we? And it's difficult. It's incredibly difficult, especially in 2018, in the world we live in, with our phone going off and emails piling up and tweets coming at us and text messages and 17 things on our schedule that we go from one call to the next, to the email, to the meeting, to the dinner, to the bed, to kiss the kids, to go to bed, to wake up the next morning, do it all over again. And it just goes. And then we wake up one day and a decade's gone.
Yeah.
What are we doing to try to pull up at least for a few minutes every day and make those moments count?
Yeah. I mean, great reflection. Thank you for that, because I think that, once again, as you can see, guys, this is not a sales book. It can be, but it is not just. That's what hit me when I heard you talking the first time, and all the time I'm taking. I took a lot of notes, about the book, but I use this thing that I listened from Jim Quick once. Right?
Yeah, sure. I know. I'm friends with Jim. That's great. I love it.
Take notes on this side and take your notes on the other. So I've been taking, and like 80% of my personal notes are about my personal relationships. So that's been working very great for me on that side. But because right now I'm not like selling, more or less different things. I'm selling the podcast to people, and I'm selling the idea of how important it is to learn. And we can hopefully later we can have an episode of Dare to Learn podcast on
Sure.
you. But it's not like I'm selling a product. So I was taking notes, and actually, my last question, or I have just one question and maybe a message for the guys on Beers and Books, but Books and Beers, sorry. It was like, I was taking notes and doing things at the same time. I was reading something and said, oh, I'm going to send this message to this person. Or, you know what, I'm going to see this guy next week. I'm going to buy this book on Amazon to give it to him. So it kind of activates my drive to do these small things. Since the first time I listened to you with James, the next time my in-laws came to town to take care of the kids, we have some water and the candies for them and the things they like. So, and it was my wife like, why are we doing this? Just trust me, it's a good thing to do.
Well, and I have to ask, what did your in-laws say?
Well, they were like, oh, now we have candies. What's the special occasion? And like, it was, I don't know, $5 or something like that,
It's never about the money.
Exactly.
It's never, everybody thinks it's about the money. It's never about the money. It's about the thoughtfulness.
Exactly.
It's about that you knew what candies they liked and you went and got them so that they were there when they got to the house.
Yes. It's the basic principle of giving a gift.
That their son-in-law would do that, would care about them that way. made them feel good, I'm sure.
Yeah,
And I'm sure it also made them feel like our daughter made a good choice, right? Because at the end of the day, I know lots of parents. And here's the thing. It is very rare to find a parent that still isn't asking years and years and years later, did they make the right choice when they think about their children and who they're in relationship with? And that's the human condition. See, the crazy, my background is crazy and eclectic, and I've had all these insane experiences and different careers and different jobs, and I've loved all of them. But the one common thread that has connected all of them is, why do human beings do the things they do? And what can we do to convince them to do the things we'd like them to do?
Yeah.
Humans are actually very simple. We pretend that we're complex. We're not. We're very simple. Everyone wants to feel that they matter. Everyone wants to feel that they're loved. Everyone wants to feel that they have a voice, that they have some agency, some ability to independence and choose their life. The principles are very basic. And if you can give those to your customers, to your in-laws, to your children, to your spouse, to your friends, to your employees, to your coworkers, you stand out in the crowd because you're paying attention to their needs.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, I think the stubborns are the things we make up out of processes and things. The feelings are more simple than that. The principle.
Yeah.
And the question was like, okay, so what does anyone can do tomorrow? Like just one piece of advice, and I maybe we have just covered that, but I know buying the book is one thing, and I'm sorry I didn't go through the questions because I need to finish reading it.
Oh, it's all good. No problem. No problem.
It's good that you remind that throughout all the chapters, and it actually read it, and those questions, some of them triggered the actions I just mentioned. But what's the invitation here for anyone?
Yeah. Yeah, so here's a homework assignment for somebody to do if they want to test this and see how this works. Take your phone, open it up to your contacts list, and kind of close your eyes and scroll through until you, and then open your eyes and see what name you have, okay? And then shoot a little video, a little selfie video, and send it to them about what they mean to you. So if it's a client, why you appreciate their business. If it's a prospect, why you're hoping to someday be able to have them as a client. If it's a friend from school, why you miss them and a fun memory you have of your good times together when you were in school. If it's a distant cousin, the time you're looking forward to seeing them at the next wedding or the next family reunion or something like that. Send a 1-minute video. It doesn't have to be long, doesn't have to be scripted, just sincere about what they mean to you. I promise you, it will completely change your experience of how these things work. And it's a fun way to pass the time. You find yourself sitting and you're supposed to be at an appointment, you're at the doctor and you're supposed to go to the doctor and the doctor's running late. Pull it out, shoot one little video and say, you don't even have to call them and talk to them. You don't have to worry about kids. Just shoot the little video, bloop, send it as a text message.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, it's a 1-minute job.
It's a 1-minute job. It's a 1-minute job with a huge opportunity for your return on investment.
That's great. That's great. Thank you. I hope I'm actually gonna do it myself and ask the rest of the guys listening or watching whatever this in the future to do it. I will follow up on as many of them as I can. But
yeah. Well, let me know how it goes. I hope it goes well.
All right. And just because I know we are getting out of time, running out of time. Do you have anything else you want to share? Joey, you don't drink beer, but it doesn't matter. You read books, you write books. So
I do. So here's the thing. Here's what I'll say about books. Here's one of the reasons I love your concept. Okay, I get asked to be on a lot of shows and podcasts and videos and things, and I was intrigued by your opening message where you said books and beers. Okay, here's why. I think that there's a belief with some people that you're either a book person or you're the kind of person that's fun to sit and have a beer with. Okay. I think you can be both.
I agree.
I think you can be the kind of person that is fun to go out and have a party with, but is also willing to have big, important philosophical conversations. I think you're somebody who can enjoy the quiet of sitting at home, reading a book and learning and absorbing the knowledge, but can also be out in the crowd sharing knowledge, and contributing back. I don't think they're mutually exclusive. It's why I love what you do. I'm excited to see the show, and I appreciate you having me on.
No, it's just on the contrary. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you for writing this book, and thank you for the messages and all this conversation. I'm really looking forward to continue this in the future. Hopefully, as I said, maybe as a guest on the podcast or whatever. I mean,
that'd be lovely. I look forward to it.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I need to go to Boulder, definitely.
Please come visit. Come visit. We'd love to see you. Perfect.
All right.
Diego, thanks so much for your time. I appreciate you having me on Books and Beers.
All right. Thank you, Joey. Thank you for your time.
All right. There we